as formal this evening anyway, and it is 5:30 now, so I will declare this agenda briefing open. And for those who haven't attended agenda briefings before, this is obviously an informal session going through the agenda as published for next week. No debate during these sessions, but an opportunity to ask questions about the agenda for elected members to raise any questions and get informed before the decision making is made next week. So councillors, I have received an apology from Councillor Steck, and obviously Councillor Gassip is joining us online. Are there any declarations of interest for the agenda this evening? Thank you. So moving through the agenda itself, I haven't given you an opportunity to the chair of that group. Are you the chair there, Councillor Andrew? You are. Do you just want to give us an update on what's happening in that space? We are noting you did meet today as well, but anything else happening in that space? Thanks, Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that committee meeting took place a couple of months ago. One of the outcomes from that meeting was the committee decided to hold a workshop in between every committee meeting, and it gives us the opportunity to obviously raise issues that we've heard from the community and those members of the public to raise issues that then can be put through as agenda items. So we did have a workshop this afternoon, and we had very good discussions, Mr Mayor, around some of the action items in DAPE itself, and also raise some opportunities to bring some agenda items forward, which hopefully will come through into council in a couple of months' time.
Great, thank you, Councillor Andrew, for that update, and we'll wait to see those. Moving on to the agenda itself, councillors, 10.21 is the Appointment International Relations Committee. Now, this does have the confidential attachment to it with that member filling that vacant position. So if there are any questions about that particular person, we will just have to go behind closed doors. But I'll just check if there's any other just general questions on this. It's all okay? Thank you, that's fine. We have the return here of the item 10.2.2 here. Now, councillors, this motion was obviously tabled and then adjourned. So when we deal with this next week, we do go back to the adjournment as it stands, which was moved and seconded. So we'll be dealing with that. If the mover and seconder wanted to remove themselves from that, we can go through them again. But at this stage, how we'll be dealing with that is starting the debate from that position. But happy to take any questions on this or any of the extra information that's been raised. Councillors, Councillor Brown.
Thanks for that. Look, on page 46, the alternate motion, under the alternate motion part 2, it says, note the practical considerations of adopting an emblem as detailed within this report, and then in brackets, it's got, I'm referring to costs of rebranding, etc., as previously stipulated. Is that meant to be part of that?
I would suggest not. CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. You're correct, that should be removed. So the idea behind the alternate recommendation was really just to reflect some of the discussion and the work that we have done, but that should not be there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on this item?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Gassett?
Mr Mayor, on page 45, about middle of the page, report seems to cast a bad light on Nucea floribunda, as it's parasitic and it may reflect on the Bunbury's, the endorsed floral emblem may affect the city's perception. I'm just wondering why we're not looking at it in a good light. I've got a report here by the people from the University of WA. Won't quote it at all, just one liner if you don't mind. Trying to work through some, got triple screens here.
Well,
Just bear with me a sec.
I'm thinking that might be leading into the level of debate. I might, while you're looking for that, or we probably just take that question in terms of why the officer's comments are around that particular side of things, and I might just ask the CEO to respond on that. Notwithstanding that,
So-
Councillor Gassett, but that might be something you might want to use as part of a debate. I'm just mindful about going into debate.
Yeah, no, so I guess I could say, why can't we quoted this report, which is a UWA report, where it says, Lucia floridunda is as unique, charismatic, and having the highest status of all plants according to Indigenous culture. So completely contrasting.
CEO, so the comments there, I'm thinking you're talking around the reputational risks that was referred to on page 45 there and the commentary around that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gassett, for the question. I'm not sure, to be honest. The report was, as you know, done a little while ago and reflects the research. This clearly has been pulled from somewhere. I'm not so sure where, but I can confirm where that came from and provide that separately to elected members.
So can we maybe reference this peer-reviewed report by 6 academics, UWA?
We'll take that on notice, Councillor Gassett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions on this item, councillors? Thank you. 10.3.1 is just that we're noting that update. Was any questions on the Evolve Transformation Program update? Thank you. 10.3.2, renaming a section of Trinity Rise, College Road. Any questions? Councillor Queen.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to have some background on Schultzia Way. I can't see any reference to the background of that.
Australian native flora.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, it's on there. That there's some information on page 63 as the attachment 10.3.2. So it's a native plant.
And one more question, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Quinn.
I remember the last time we looked at street names, and I believe that there was going to be some discussion or investigation into increasing the number of female street names.
Yep.
Has there been any progress on that?
Yeah, I think given that obviously the Landgate are generally responsible for the street names, but I might just ask the CEO about, and I know that was raised, and I do recall that, I'm sure Councillor Steele recalls that conversation as well, but maybe just if I can ask the CEO through a street naming, who comes up with the responsible names, because as you can see, there's a few there, but not a huge list, and yeah, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might get the Director of Infrastructure to answer that question.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. The last one we had up here, one of the points that was raised was about doing a workshop with council. So we've got that workshop prepared, and it'll be coming up in the next couple of meetings around street naming and how that works and operates.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Turner?
Sorry, after reading like 1,700 pages, I might have forgotten a little bit. It says there's no rateable properties on this section of road, but when I looked at the diagram, whether I'm looking at wrong, there was houses facing that street frontage.
Yep, could you just, for the minute taker, just scrolling down a couple of pages to page, keep going, a couple more. Probably that one. So I'm guessing you're talking about the ones there on the inside of the new development there?
Yeah, the Trinity face
Yep.
with road frontage.
Sure.
And maybe rateable properties.
Yep. CEO, are they access or through a different thing? I might just ask you, might have to refer that one, what their address would be.
If I could, Mayor, refer that to the Manager of Planning and Building.
Sorry, through the Mayor. Yes, they are rateable properties. They're proposed about 8 single houses in that area and about 10 single houses on the back yet to be developed.
So the question there being that in the comments it talks about is it no current rateable properties, but there will be future rateable properties on that site. So I think that was around the community consultation, Councillor Turner, so they hadn't spoken to any of the current property owners because there aren't any. right now. Yep. That fine? Yep. Councillor Steele?
Further on from councillor Turner's question, so the loop, is that going to be named something different? See the
Inside
road-
the- inside the
inside
development.
road,
Into the,
the internal road, I'm assuming, is that then where the house is going to be built and they're going to be like 1A, 1B, 1C,
CEO?
or whatever?
Director of Infrastructure will answer that.
Sorry, if you just scroll up one page, please, you'll see on there that it's
Oh, there you go.
Lambert Loop. We've had that before
Okay,
council
thank
previously.
you. Oh,
Yep.
I've just gone back one page.
Yep. Great, thank you. Any other questions on this one? Councillor Smith?
Question, if I may. Do we have any say at all on what they're called? Because I think, for me, that Schultz Hill Way doesn't kind of tip off the tongue, really. It's kind of, I've never heard of it, native plant or not.
As far as I'm aware, there's the 4 names that have been offered, but again, I might ask the CEO if he can suggest what other rationale or where the city falls into that position.
Thank you, Mayor. Director of Infrastructure, are you happy to answer that?
Sorry, probably just need to take on notice. I haven't been involved with this item, so I'm not sure what's on it. But look, if you're happy, we'll just take it on notice and get back to you.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you very much. 1033, councillors. Oops, sorry. Yeah, did we go one too far there, minute taken? 1033? Yeah, we can't miss our favourite one, our rate exemption applications. Minute taken, can't be doing that. Any questions on this? Councillor Gill?
I've never heard of Housing Choices Australia. Is this another, obviously not-for-profit? Is it, who are they?
I think it talks about, providing subsidised relief for people in distress, which, they would be another not-for-profit. I don't know, CEO, if there's any further information on what they are, who they be, but that might just be something to look into. But CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. They are a not-for-profit organisation, and like with all of these, we have to assess them in accordance with the Act and in accordance with their constitution. So if they either meet the criteria or they don't for a rate exemption. So we don't have any further information in terms of what they do, but other than that they are eligible for a rate exemption.
Thank you. No further questions. 1041 is the proposed scheme amendment, which is there. Any questions, Councillor Turner?
Probably just around the local residents, because there was quite a few objections in relation to that. Have the residents been informed about the changes at all? And
Is this
has
this
there
one, or
been
this
any
might be the
feedback?
next? That might be the next one. Talking about the drive-through. This is the one out in industrial land. Save that one. Questions on, this is a scheme amendment for some industrial land out on the Southwestern Highway, which did have some comments, but all from service providers. All good? Okay, Councillor Turner. Yep.
Do I have to say it again?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the initial, and this is where probably elected members, we've approved, the council has approved the initial side of things through the fast food outlet and the drive-through. So this obviously application then doesn't fit into that category. But at CEO, are the initial submissions, do they get commented this is coming back to council, I guess is the question. Or do they need to be, and have they?
Thank you, Mayor. I might get the Manager of Planning and Building to answer that.
To the Mayor, we did consider consulting back to the adjoining residences, but in terms of the actual application itself, it doesn't propose any additional variations or any changes, but in terms of variation to any planning policy requirements. So the actual fast food land use has been approved, and it's been approved for the whole lot. and that was the thing that was being advertised initially. So in terms of this application, we were purely looking at what they were proposing in addition to that, and the things they were adding in addition, none of them varied any planning policy requirements, which would usually be advertised. So yeah, there wasn't any advertising for this application.
Thank you. So CEO, just if, through the manager or to the director, either one, but do they just want to maybe clarify on that point? Talks about obviously the initial development approval has been determined by council, so the fact that there's no delegation for them to approve. So I'm just not sure if they want to expand any further on that, just to clarify that point.
Thank you, Mayor. So if you would like an advice note that just confirms that prior to next week's council meeting.
Yes, sure.
But what I've heard tonight is that the current application doesn't require any variation to the approval or any planning conditions that have already been approved. So, but we're happy to provide an advice note if that clarifies things for elected members.
Sure. Councillor Turner?
I'm not sure how to word this as a question rather than a statement. So something going from a single story to a double story is not considered a large change regarding planning?
CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. Manager of Planning and Building will provide a response.
Through the Mayor, the additional story still complies with the building height requirements under our scheme, so it doesn't propose a variation. We were concerned about, we knew the community did not want that fast food outlet there in the first place, and so if we went back out, it would stir the objections again, but they would be raising issues that have already been approved by council and would not be relevant to this application. So for that reason, we didn't think there was a need to go out and advertise because it complies with the development standards of our scheme.
Yeah. Further questions? Councillor Smith?
Just following on from that question, might comply, but does it comply with the general area? Is that taken into
That's been dealt.
consideration?
That's all been dealt with,
Yeah,
Councillor
okay, so
Smith.
that's been taken into.
So the planning use has been approved, and this is obviously then adding the office, which is complying that, and it fits in with all the other codes. Councillor Steele?
Are we going to actually hear from the people? I would like to know more on what they want to use that office space for and everything like that, because though you might be only putting 11 spaces in, what if you have like a physiotherapist up there? Then they're going to have clients coming and going each day.
Sure.
And I have concern that the residents haven't been told.
Sure, the proponents are here, but we don't have the opportunity to have that conversation just yet. They indicated they will likely make a deputation next week where they can do that. They're obviously will be available to have a conversation after this meeting, but we don't have the opportunity through this process to have that back and forth opportunity. I'm sure they're more than happy to speak to any elected members after this meeting or during the week. Councillor Turner?
I guess I'll just ask, is there any restrictions on the upstairs office use?
CEO?
Thank you. The Planning Officer, Philip Diamond, will answer that.
In terms of when, to the Mayor, in terms of when we considered it, there's not necessarily a restriction on it. They have noted in that application that it'll be incidental to the fast food outlet, but for a local centre zone, an office is a DU, so it can be considered there. So as long as it meets the definition of an office under the scheme, there's not necessarily restriction beyond it's needing to comply with things like parking and that kind of thing.
Further questions? Thank you. Thank you to the planning team on those answers. (10.5.1). Any questions on this?
I'm sorry, I do have one more question on the last.
Sure, we can go back.
Because I'm assuming the DA expires, it's 2 years, isn't it, usually?
Yeah, no, it hasn't expired.
Yeah, so no, not till September. So that, does that mean the 2 years starts again, that for development to start, or does it, they have to have it built by September?
CEO, so obviously from the initial approval for their DA, well, how does that work in if this is approved? Where does that fit into that timeline?
I'll just get the Manager of Planning and Building to answer that.
Good question, through the Mayor.
Take that one on notice.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll take that one on notice.
That's good. Thank you. Any further ones before we move on in 10:14? No, all good? No, it's all right. Very good. 10.5.1, which is the char map and the executive recommendation there. Any questions on this one? All good? Thank you. 10.5.2, Prince of Streetscape Concept Design. And I might just ask the CEO just to make a comment. I know there was a presentation last week and a request there to ask some of the traders around the couple of options. CEO, I was putting you on the spot there. Are you happy just to maybe touch on where that process is at?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So following the briefing last week where we talked about the options and there was questions particularly from Councillor Gassip, which we've responded to. There's been further consultation with some of those business owners around options A and B, as per the discussion last week, and also around the timeframes that would be expected with either the option of just doing the road or doing option A and B, which is more about the amenity and the footpaths and the streetscape. So we're looking to, we'll summarise that information by later this week and send that out to elected members so you can see the feedback that we've got that responds to the discussion last week.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Kozisek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I apologise, I was unwell last week, so I wasn't at the briefing, so I've got a few questions, if you don't mind. I'm just looking at option B, which would be my preferred, but the raised area that is designated as a crossing in the middle of the street, basically you walk from one side of the street straight into somewhere where you can't cross because it's an alfresco there with potted plants around, so I'm just wondering whether that has been thought about. Sorry, is that a question or not? Not sure. The other one is the alfresco on the opposite side of alfresco area designated opposite the cafe's alfresco. I'm just wondering what was the rationale in putting another area there rather than parking, which everybody has asked for, please?
Sure. We'll take the first question around, or both questions around that crossing area, I guess, and see if the CEO's got a response for that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll probably pass that to the Director of Infrastructure to talk through both those questions.
Thank you, through Mr Mayor. Yeah, so look, the intent at the moment, if you remember, this is purely a concept plan, so I suppose that hasn't been determined that will definitely be al fresco, so that's still point for consideration. It may be that we put some seating in that location and leave it open for people to go across. I suppose the plan's just showing the potential of what could happen there if it was required. And sorry, Councillor, the second part of your question was?
So where you've suggested an alfresco area may be, in terms of it's not in front of anything just yet, would that not be better use for parking?
Yeah, there's no restaurants or cafes on that side of the street, so I'm just wondering the rationale of that, considering that there's an arcade which has lots of seating.
Yep. So again, it was looked at a couple of points. One was trying to get some trees into that location so that we continue that process of putting trees down the street, so that allows that to happen. It also looks at that as being the dominant crossing point for the street, and so you're not walking between cars to try and cross the street. And that would, the intent is for that all to be at grade. So there's no curbs, no up and down. You would walk straight across. If you're pushing a pram or a wheelchair, again, it would be flat all the way through. So the other intent is obviously it would be a point to slow vehicles down as they go through there. So again, it's all around trying to make that a safe crossing point through the street there and an easy crossing point through the street.
If I may?
Sure, Councillor Cossing.
So if you're crossing from that side of the street, from the suggested new alfresco to where Cafes has their alfresco, you actually can't walk through there.
Yep. See you.
So, yeah, I'm just wondering how you're going to do that, that's all.
If I can point to the picture up on the screen, where those the two black rectangles are, that would actually be the crossing point.
Oh, okay, yep.
So you'd be directing, that would be your tactile markers of that on the edge there for the crossing. So in essence, that would probably be the place where people would
Yeah,
cross.
okay, yep, cool. I couldn't see that on that,
No,
that's
that's
all
fine.
cool. And one last question, if I
Thanks.
may.
Yeah, Councillor Cossing. Yep.
You talked about treescape in that area. Is there going to be some sort of permanent shade structure there on that new alfresco area, or are you just possibly seeding, or have we not progressed to that point yet?
See you.
Thank you, Mayor. The Director of Infrastructure will respond.
Yeah, I think at this stage the intent was to look at probably trying to place seating under the trees there, and at this stage we're sort of at concept stage. So again, once we get down to detail, there'll be those issues that we'll start to have a look at. At this particular point in time, there isn't one shown there, so there isn't any intent at this point in
And
time.
just one more, sorry.
Sure.
I just realised I'd made another note. There was discussion in some of the comments about possibly putting a disabled parking bay in that area, because we don't have any. Is that something that we could consider at some point? Thank you.
Yep, we talked about that one last week.
Did you? Yeah, okay.
We did, Mayor. I'll get the Director of Infrastructure to answer that.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Look, the intent is to look at how we can incorporate disabled parking into that area. It may be that we can look at dual using like loading zones and other areas as drop-off points. So yes, we're aware of those comments and we're working on that as we get into the detail about how that can be accommodated in that location.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Steele.
I've noticed that the 15-minute bays have gone from 3 to 5. I'm going to make a statement. We have so many of them around Bunbury already. Please, can we reconsider that? Because if we look at the shops in the area, which
I think
is
before we get too far into
why,
debating
yeah,
there.
explain why. Because like,
Yeah,
like you
so
go to hairdressers,
sure, it's okay.
you wanna-
No more debate.
15 minutes, mate.
See ya.
Director of Infrastructure will respond.
Doesn't want to.
You're on.
Thank you. Some of us only need 15 minutes for a haircut, councillor, so maybe, again, through you, Mr Mayor. Again, they were included in the concept because they were requests from the businesses down there to increase the number of 15-minute bays. Are we going to end up like that? Not necessarily at this particular point in time, but at the time when we did the consultation, there were requests from two of the businesses for consideration of more 15-minute bays.
Sorry, I'll just jump in there. That just comment that has been a couple of times made around that this is a concept. If this is approved to this point, a final design, would that come back to council before endorsement to go out to temper? I suppose it would be part of the tender document, wouldn't it?
So thank you, Mayor. So what we're trying to do through this process, like as we discussed last week, the road has to be replaced. The road is in poor condition, it has to be replaced. The question that we're discussing now is how much we continue the work that's been done at the other end, at the top end of Princep Street, and bringing that all the way down. Sorry, your question was?
See, yeah, that's what happens
Yeah.
when you just start talking,
Sorry.
really. The question would be that there's been mentioned a few
Oh,
times
yeah,
this is
yeah.
just concept, a concept.
So should we get agreement from council around option A, B, A or B is the ones that we're recommending. Clearly, the report recommends option A. If council was to recommend either just doing the road, that's one thing, or option A or option B, then we would go to detailed design. So there would be further work that would need to be done by the infrastructure team to get those to detailed design, and that would, I assume, would come back to council through one of our briefing sessions. But I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure just to make any further comments.
Thank you. Look, the intent is when we do a concept plan like this, you have about 90% of it right, and you're adjusting the last 10% as you get down to the detail. So that's what we would be thinking would be happening with this. So things like those bays and the crossing points, we would just tighten that information up. So as CEO said, probably the intent would be that once we get to detail, once we've done the detail, we would bring it back probably at a briefing session rather than a decision-making process to keep
Thank
council
you. I
informed.
just think that clarity on some of those minor points would be obviously raised and discussed if the general agreement is there to go through those. Councillor Andrew?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just, I guess, a very quick one. Noting that this is in detailed design, can we also have consideration of the colour of pavers used? There's a lot of confusion at the Prinsep Street roundabout with people thinking it's a crosswalk, and it's quite dangerous sometimes for people assuming. If we can have some consideration around that with the design, thank you.
CEO?
Director of Infrastructure will respond.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Look, it is an issue, and it's been an issue not just in Bunbury, but a lot of towns I've been at. The intent is, you know, it's not a crosswalk, it's not marked as a crosswalk, it isn't. We've got signage up there that says pedestrians give way, so we've done everything in our power to make it very clear that that's not the case. So yes, we can have a think about how we can reinforce that more with the public as part of the process.
The proposed walkway there, is that a proposed pedestrian crossing though? CEO?
Director of Infrastructure?
Not a designated crossing. Main Roads are just reviewing their... excuse me, if you just take a moment. To have a dedicated crosswalk, you have to have a significant volume of vehicle traffic and a significant volume of pedestrian traffic, and you have to meet that minimum requirement to get a crosswalk in. Main Roads are right at the end of a process of reviewing their crossing points and how they designate them, which will, I think, reduce some of those requirements, which means as we go into the future and not too distant future, there'll be some more opportunity to get proper crossing points in around the place. So again, if that happens while we're doing the design process, we would look at how we may be able to incorporate that into the design as we go forward.
So this would be more similar to the roundabout sort of crossings, but at grade. Sure. Councillor Steele?
I'm going to phrase it as a question. So a while ago, we used to have a walkable city, and we have those signs, and I think that's what's bringing up now about giving way to cars. Can we not start flipping the scenario to actually that we're a city of people rather than cars? So could we start now maybe changing those signs to actually give way to people crossing? Could we start thinking along those lines that maybe these could be a way that we make this city more human?
Yep, I think we could probably get a good briefing when the main roads work is finished, but CEO, if there's any further comment on that?
Probably ask the Director of Infrastructure to respond to that.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. I think unfortunately at the moment the road rules are set up that pedestrians must give way to vehicles. I think Main Road's looking at their crossing policy and trying to allow more pedestrian-friendly crossings as a result of essentially what you're asking. So I suspect that in the, as I said, we've just offered some comments up, but they're just right at the end of that process of reviewing. So we're hoping that out of that, we'll actually be able to utilise more opportunities to put actual crossing points in that act as a crossing point where vehicles do have to give way. So again, we're tied at the moment because the only one you've got is a crosswalk, but there's a number of other ones that are being considered in this new review that they've done.
Councillor Turner?
I'm just interested in the width of the footpath, like the current width on the angled parking side. If that was to go to reverse parking, how much wider would that footpath be, please?
So I'm going to take that's between that option and the option above it, option A. Yep, that's the go. CEO?
Director of Infrastructure can answer that.
Thank you, through Mr Mayor. I believe it's about a metre, about 900 mil to a metre. So that's the extra width you would get in there if you went to parallel parking as opposed to angled parking.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Gassett?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, my questions are mainly related to risk management of the business interruption. So the budget here, point 2 requires that we consider this amount in the budget over 2 financial years. So I'm just wondering how this is going to work in terms of project construction, commencement and completion, so I get clear in my head what we're looking at. Spread over 2 financial years. I'm assuming the first part will be for design.
Yep. CEO?
Again, I'll just get the Director of Infrastructure to answer that, Mayor.
Thank you. The intent was, the thought process we had at the time was that generally the town and CBD area is busy sort of leading up to Christmas, through Christmas and probably up to Easter. So the intent was looking, and again, we'll do consultation with the businesses, and they were asked that as part of the original survey. The intent was look to start the work probably after Easter next year. So you'd be doing part of the work in next financial year, and it would continue into the following financial year. So you'd be looking at doing it over the winter season through there, when hopefully it has less impact on the businesses themselves.
So you're talking sort of May through July, August, whatever?
Yeah, correct, Mr Smith, yes.
Sure. And I think Councillor Gassif, just following on that answer, I believe what was mentioned earlier, that information that went out to the businesses, which we'll provide a summary later in the week, also has around that timing of construction as well, to get some feedback on that, which will be supplied. Further question? You said?
Yeah. No, I'm just on the same point. I'm just wondering, if we're going to be, let's say we pass the 25 budget, and for some reason we don't pass the 26 allocation, what happens then?
CEO?
So, thank you, Mayor. I would assume we're asking for the total cost for the whole budget. So, in approving this project, you'd be approving the total project, of which it may be split over 2 years. So, we'll express that in the documents that come back.
It'll be, if council resolved to do it, then Councillor Gassip, obviously, council would have resolved that, so you would have to rescind that motion to not get it through. It would form part of that following budget. It's the only reason you'd be able to rescind it, and you can't rescind a motion that's already in place. So, yeah, if it was committed to, it's committed to effectively.
Just that it's got consider, doesn't say.
Oh, the second part of that. We'll consider allocating the funding.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, Mr Mayor, does council have any liability towards businesses, let's say if there's some interruption that causes them to have financial distress or close down? It's a prolonged period. Any liability?
Yeah. CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, in any of these sorts of projects, there is going to be disruption. There's disruption with any of the road projects or any of the other significant projects that we do. I think the point that the Director of Infrastructure is making is that we will work with the businesses to minimise that impact and ensure that that people still have access to their shop fronts through the way the project is managed. It would not be typical that councils would or state governments would offer compensation for works such as this or other works in the normal course, and where you know, there is disruption that is expected. That is part of doing what is a major upgrade to the road and the streetscape. But I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure if he wants to make any further comment.
No, you're correct. There will be disruption. The intent is that we start that process with the affected businesses now and have those conversations and make sure they're well informed about how the work's going to progress and how we will be endeavouring to ensure that there is access to their businesses at all time, at least as a pedestrian, as a bare minimum while we're doing the roadworks, and then again when we're doing the footpath works, we will be ensuring that that access is maintained for the businesses.
Thank you. CEO, that question though, would there possibly be any liability to the city on that, was the question.
So my understanding, Mr Mayor, would be no, and we'll do everything we can to work with the businesses to mitigate the risks. At the end of the day, at the very least, as we've said, the road has to be done, and what we're talking about is the other options that hopefully will improve the viability of those streets and the fact that as you beautify the streetscape and make it more attractive, you hope more people will actually come to those shops that are in that street. So as we're losing car parking bays, we hope that'll be well and truly replaced with pedestrians.
Thank you. Councillor Gassip, you going to follow up there?
Yes, Mr Mayor. This is pretty important for me. So are you, Mr Mayor, aware that there was a business that closed not because of council works, but other works, road works that were done recently, but also about 18 years ago when I was in council?
we need to be obviously focusing on this particular thing, and I'm happy
Yes.
for you to raise that during debate. But unless there's a question associated with that,
Yeah, I'm just asking if you're aware that businesses have gone bankrupt with prolonged construction in the Bunbury city.
I'm aware
Yeah.
that businesses have gone
Okay.
bankrupt. Sure.
Sure. So, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure, can I ask a question? Can we ensure that the businesses are fully aware of what the impact and the disruption is? For example, it says, yeah, half the access will, full road closure and pedestrian access remaining for half the project. I'm not sure if that means no access to half the project, but our directors just said all access will remain at least for pedestrian. Is that correct? All access will remain for pedestrians throughout the whole project?
CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the first part of that question, are the businesses aware? Well, that's part of the follow-up work that we're doing, that we've done the end of last week and this week to provide the options A and B to all of the shop owners, but also to talk to them about timeframes. So all of that is very clear. As we've discussed through this is concept, and we've still got should this, whatever the council decision is, then work on the detailed design. So we will work with the businesses as part of that process when we do the detailed design and when the scheduling of the work to make sure that we minimise the disruption. But we cannot, there is going to be disruption because of the very nature of the work. That we will do our best to mitigate that through the work that we'll do with the shop owners through the detailed design process. I'm not sure if the director wants to make any further comments.
Councillor Castle.
But the traders are aware that the project could be up to 3.5 months, or
Councillor Castle, the consultation with the traders has been very thorough, and any works happening will continue with that.
I understand that. I'm just wondering, are they aware that could be 3.5 months?
It's all been discussed with the traders.
And we have an assurance that they are fully aware of
Councillor Castle, I've answered that question to say that we've done full consultation with the business owners, and that is very highlighted in the report through that consultation. What has currently occurred?
So point 4, how could that have been done with point 4? Any number of alternative methods could be employed.
Because Councillor Gasser, before we make a decision on what concept we go with, is obviously then going to be the conversation about how that goes ahead. If council doesn't want to go with any of the option A or B, is going to be obviously a total different format and process of doing a option C of doing nothing. So until such time as council endorse this project, that conversations will then be having with the city, with the business owners.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I've made some points. It's long enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kozisek, you had another question?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. I'm just looking at the possible proposed construction time as being between July and November 2024. And you're saying a 3-month build period is normal? My concern is that it's running very close to Christmas trading, etc., and I didn't want to be too much disruption.
Yeah, sure. See ya.
The Director of Infrastructure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we're probably looking at 3 to 4 months, that 12 to 16 weeks, hopefully around the 14-week mark. The intent would be to start it as early as we can. So if we were starting in April and you take 3 to 4 months from April, that's when we'd be looking at. So we'd be looking at commencing it in next financial year and working through. So the intent is we wouldn't be working down there in November. We would want to be out there in November. One of the things we do as part of the process is develop a construction management plan that lays out how we're going to do the work, and even if we're going to get a contractor in to do the work, that would then be dictating how that work is undertaken. So things like having spoken to the traders and got their concerns and ensuring that when the work's done is that all those conditions are met. So if we say we're going to maintain pedestrian access, then we'll be maintaining pedestrian access. So it comes with the next stage, if you like, as we get into the detail. It's been a good exercise because I suppose we've had a number of conversations with business owners down there already. So we've started that process. There's a sort of some form of relationship between our people and the business owners, and we will ensure and continue to make sure that conversation is continued as we go into it. So everyone's well informed about what's going to happen, when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen.
Further questions? Okay. Thank you, councillors. I believe that brings us to a close for tonight's briefing. Thank you very much for everyone attending. Thanks, Councillor Gasser, for joining us, and we will see you all later in the week and or next week. Thank you.